This was supposed to be Hitler's ultimate weapon. A machine designed to turn the war overnight. But instead of killing Americans, it killed more Germans than the enemy ever did. It broke down, exploded, and trapped its own crews inside. Engineers knew it was a disaster. But telling Hitler the truth meant death. So they lied. And sent this machine to war anyway. Tonight, we uncover the WWII weapon built by fear. Not logic. By the middle of World War II, Germany was already losing in ways that could not be fixed. Fuel shortages were no longer temporary. Factories were no longer safe. Trained engineers were no longer available in large numbers. And yet, strangely, inside the inner circle of Adolf Hitler, none of this felt permanent. Hitler did not experience the war the way soldiers did. He did not experience it the way factory workers did. He experienced it through images. Maps spread across long tables. Scale models of weapons placed under bright lights. Artists' drawings of machines that did not yet exist. To Hitler, these images were not ideas. They were proof. Proof that Germany still had power. Proof that destiny had not changed. Proof that victory was still waiting, just slightly delayed. This was the beginning of a very dangerous illusion. Hitler did not think like an engineer. Hitler had no patience for engineering limits. He did not care about maintenance cycles, fuel consumption, supply chains, repair time. What he cared about was impact. A weapon that could fire farther than any other. A machine heavier than anything the enemy could stop. A design so large that it inspired fear before it was even used. If a general said, "This will take years to perfect," Hitler heard only one thing: "It will be perfect." If an engineer said, "This may not work reliably," Hitler heard something else entirely: "It will work once destiny aligns." Reality, to him, was flexible. And slowly, terrifyingly, German engineering began to treat reality the same way. The shift that no one announced. There was no official order that said, "Build weapons to impress me." No document. No signed command. Instead, it spread quietly. Engineers noticed patterns. When small, efficient weapons were presented, Hitler barely reacted. When massive, dramatic designs were shown, he leaned forward. When someone spoke carefully and realistically, he lost interest. When someone spoke boldly and confidently, even dishonestly, he listened. Soon, survival inside the system required performance. Engineers began designing for the briefing room, not the battlefield. A machine did not need to survive long combat, be easily repaired, be produced in large numbers. It only needed to look unstoppable, sound revolutionary, promise future victory. This was the moment engineering turned into theater. The maps never lied, because they were never real. In Hitler's headquarters, the war always looked controllable. Arrows moved forward on maps even when armies were retreating. New symbols appeared representing weapons that did not yet exist. Timelines stretched endlessly into the future. Each delay was explained by a miracle weapon just weeks away. Engineers fed this belief. Not always out of loyalty. Often out of fear. Because the truth had become dangerous. To say, "This weapon cannot work," was no longer technical criticism. It was defeatism. And defeatism, in Nazi Germany, was a crime. Why size became more important than success? Hitler believed history favored the bold. In his mind, bigger weapons meant stronger will. Larger machines meant greater destiny. Complexity meant superiority. Simple weapons felt boring to him. Refinement felt weak. So engineers escalated. Each new design had to be larger than the last, more complex than before, more dramatic in presentation. Soon, practicality was not just ignored. It was seen as a lack of imagination. Factories were ordered to attempt designs that violated basic logic. Weapons too heavy for transport. Machines requiring perfect conditions. Systems dependent on materials Germany no longer had. But in the briefing room, none of that mattered. Because on paper, the machines were flawless. The war split into two realities. By this point, World War II had become two separate wars. One war was fought in mud, in snow, in burning cities, by exhausted soldiers. The other war was fought on tables, on blueprints, in models, inside Hitler's imagination. The machines built to impress him belonged entirely to the Second War. They did not exist to fight enemies. They existed to protect belief. Belief that Germany was still unbeatable. Belief that surrender was impossible. Belief that reality could still be bent by sheer will. This belief would cost Germany more than any battlefield defeat. Long before Germany ran out of weapons, it ran out of honesty. And in the silence between truth and belief, machines were built not to fight, but to convince one man that the war was not yet lost. By the time German engineers truly understood what was happening, it was already too late to stop. No one had announced a new rule. No official decree had been issued. No paper ever said, from now on, truth is optional. And yet, inside design offices and factories across Germany, everyone felt it. Something fundamental had changed. Engineers were no longer rewarded for accuracy. They were rewarded for confidence. Not confidence in results. Confidence in promises. The dangerous power of a briefing room. Inside the presentation rooms, everything was controlled. Lighting was careful. Models were polished. Drawings were enlarged so flaws disappeared. When Adolf Hitler entered these rooms, the atmosphere changed instantly. No one interrupted him. No one corrected him. No one argued. Engineers learned to read his reactions. If he leaned forward, the design was good. If he nodded silently, it was acceptable. If he frowned, careers ended. So engineers adapted, not consciously at first, but instinctively. They stopped saying, "This may fail under stress. This requires materials we lack. This cannot be mass-produced." Instead, they said, "With further development. Once production stabilizes. After minor improvements." These phrases were vague. They were flexible. They were safe. And slowly, honesty began to disappear, not replaced by lies, but by ambiguity. Why no one said no? To understand why engineers went along with this, you have to understand fear. Not dramatic fear. Not panic. Quiet, constant fear. Fear of being labeled uncooperative. Fear of being accused of sabotage. Fear of being removed, arrested, or simply disappearing. In Nazi Germany, failure was never neutral. A broken machine was not just a technical issue. It was a political one. If a weapon failed, someone had to be blamed. And blame never moved upward. It moved down. to designers, technicians, and factory supervisors. So engineers learned something essential. It is safer to promise too much than to admit a limit. Lying without words. What made this system especially dangerous was that many engineers did not technically lie. They simply designed around the truth. Instead of saying, "This machine will overheat," they added more cooling systems, increasing complexity. Instead of saying, "This weapon is too heavy," they assumed perfect roads and transport conditions. Instead of saying, "This cannot be repaired in the field," they ignored field repair entirely. On paper, everything still worked. In reality, the machines became fragile, delicate, and unusable. But since they were never tested under real conditions, no one could officially say they failed. The birth of impossible weapons. This was the moment when German engineering crossed a line. Weapons began to be designed that required flawless manufacturing, perfect materials, ideal weather, unlimited fuel, conditions that no wartime Germany could ever provide. Yet these designs thrived because they looked brilliant on paper. Engineers competed with one another not for reliability, but for impressiveness. Who could promise the longest range, the thickest armor, the most devastating theoretical impact? Soon, projects were approved not because they were useful, but because they sounded revolutionary. The machines became more complex. Production slowed. Failures multiplied. But no one dared to simplify them, because simplification looked like weakness. The factories felt the consequences first. While presentations stayed clean and optimistic, factories told a different story. Workers struggled to assemble components that barely fit together. Replacement parts did not exist. Machines required tolerances too precise for bombed-out industry. Each delay was explained upward as a temporary setback. Each failure was blamed on inexperienced labor, Allied bombing, supply disruptions. Never on the design itself. The engineers at the top remained protected. The workers on the floor absorbed the damage. And still, the projects continued. When belief became more important than progress. By now, the purpose of these machines had quietly shifted. They were no longer meant to be deployed quickly, change battles, save soldiers' lives. They were meant to sustain belief. Belief that Germany still had options. Belief that defeat was not final. Belief that one last breakthrough would reverse everything. Each new project delayed hard decisions. Why retreat when a miracle weapon was coming? Why negotiate when victory was just months away? And so the war dragged on, not because Germany was strong, but because belief had replaced strategy. Engineers who knew and said nothing. Many engineers understood the truth by 1943. They knew these machines would not arrive in time. They knew they would not work as promised. They knew resources were being wasted. But knowing something and saying something were very different. Silence became survival. Not loud silence. Quiet compliance. And that silence allowed the illusion to continue. The most dangerous lies of the war were not shouted. They were whispered in technical language. Not written in propaganda, but hidden inside blueprints. And as long as belief remained intact, the machines did not need to work at all. By the later years of the war, something strange had happened inside Germany's weapons industry. The machines being designed no longer felt like tools of war. They felt like monuments. They were massive. They were complex. They were visually overwhelming. And yet, quietly, they failed at the one thing weapons are meant to do: fight. When size became a substitute for strategy. As Germany's position worsened, the machines grew larger. Not faster. Not simpler. Not easier to repair. Just larger. Bigger armor. Longer barrels. Heavier structures. It was as if size itself had become a form of hope. To the leadership, especially Adolf Hitler, size meant seriousness. It meant commitment. It meant that Germany was still thinking in grand terms, not desperate ones. A small, practical improvement felt insignificant. A gigantic machine felt like destiny. So engineers were encouraged, directly and indirectly, to think big, even when thinking big made no sense. Weapons designed for perfect worlds. On blueprints, these machines were unstoppable. They assumed flawless roads, unlimited fuel, trained crews available at all times, no mechanical wear, no constant combat stress. Reality offered none of this. Many machines were so heavy they damaged infrastructure just by moving. Bridges collapsed. Transport vehicles failed. Rail systems struggled to carry them. Some required days of preparation just to change position. In a fast-moving war, speed mattered more than intimidation. But speed was sacrificed for appearance. Why failure did not end projects? Normally, when a weapon fails repeatedly, it is cancelled. In this system, failure meant something else. Failure meant the weapon was not yet extreme enough. Too slow? Add more power. Too unreliable? Increase precision. Too fragile? Add more armor. Each solution made the machine heavier, more complex, and harder to build. But it also made it more impressive on paper. So projects did not end. They escalated. Months turned into years. Costs multiplied. Resources vanished. Yet the machines remained almost ready. The soldiers who did not want these weapons. When some of these machines finally reached operational units, the reaction was not pride. It was fear. Crews knew that if something broke, it could not be fixed quickly. If the machine was damaged, recovery was impossible. If it was spotted, it became an obvious target. What was meant to inspire terror often attracted destruction. The machines demanded perfect conditions, and punished anyone who failed to provide them. Quietly, soldiers learned to avoid them. But those experiences rarely reached decision-makers. Reports were rewritten. Problems were softened. Successes were exaggerated. The image mattered more than the outcome. Propaganda over performance. Even unfinished machines had value. They were photographed from low angles. Filmed in dramatic lighting. Described in powerful language. They appeared in newsreels and reports as symbols of future victory. The public did not need to see them in action. They only needed to know they existed. Inside Germany, these machines became myths before they became weapons. And myths do not need to function. The real cost no one saw. While these giant projects consumed attention and materials, other things disappeared quietly. Fuel shortages worsened. Aircraft production suffered. Training programs collapsed. Resources that could have supported many reliable weapons were consumed by a few spectacular ones. Germany was not short on ideas. It was short on time. and time was being spent feeding belief instead of reality. 2 wars, 1 country. By now, Germany was fighting 2 wars. One war was fought by exhausted soldiers who needed simple weapons, reliable support, realistic planning. The other war was fought inside offices and briefing rooms. That war was about confidence, about reassurance, about convincing one man that defeat was not inevitable. The giant machines belonged entirely to the Second War. They were not built to be common. They were built to be unforgettable. These machines did not fail because they were weak. They failed because they were never meant to belong to reality. They were built to be seen, not used. To inspire belief, not victory. And belief, on its own, cannot win a war. By the time the war reached its final phase, something important had changed inside Germany. Not on the front lines. Not in the skies. But inside the factories. People no longer asked whether Germany would win. They asked how long the illusion could be kept alive. Fuel shortages were no longer temporary problems. They were permanent. Bombing raids no longer felt surprising. They felt routine. And yet, inside production reports, optimism continued. Projects were described as nearing completion. Weapons were said to be almost ready. Timelines were always pushed forward, just far enough to avoid collapse. This was not hope. This was delay. When honesty became dangerous. In earlier years, engineers still debated openly. They still argued about limits. They still questioned unrealistic demands. By now, that world was gone. Saying this will not work no longer sounded technical. It sounded political. And politics was lethal. A failed design was no longer just a failure. It could be interpreted as lack of belief, as sabotage, as disloyalty. So engineers learned to protect themselves. They stopped refusing. They stopped correcting. They stopped warning. Instead, they agreed, slowly. The strategy of complexity. One of the safest ways to avoid blame was complexity. A complex machine could always be explained. If it failed, the explanation was technical. If it was delayed, the reasons were endless. More systems meant more excuses. More precision meant more time. More dependencies meant more waiting. On paper, complexity looked like genius. In reality, it guaranteed delay. And delay was useful. A weapon that never finished could never fail publicly. Projects that existed only as promises. Many late war machines reached a strange state. They were not cancelled. They were not completed. They existed in between. Parts were built. Facilities expanded. Workers assigned. But assembly never truly finished. Each month, progress reports claimed advancement. Each month, timelines shifted quietly. These machines were no longer meant to arrive. They were meant to exist as hope. Hope that something powerful was coming. Hope that decisions could be postponed. Hope that surrender was unnecessary. Underground factories, empty purpose. As bombing intensified, production moved underground. Factories were hidden in mountains and tunnels. Protected from air raids. Difficult to reach. Inside, work continued day and night. But production was fragmented. One facility built parts that never met other parts. Another produced components for machines that no longer had assembly lines. Workers often had no idea what they were building. This separation protected secrecy. But it also ensured inefficiency. And inefficiency was tolerated. Because efficiency no longer mattered. Engineers who understood the truth. By now, many engineers knew exactly what was happening. They knew the war could not be saved by machines. They knew resources were being wasted. They knew time was being bought, not victory. But speaking the truth changed nothing. Silence was safer. And so they continued designing machines that would never fully exist. Not out of loyalty. Not out of belief. Out of survival. Why the system could not stop. Stopping these projects required admitting failure. Admitting failure required admitting doubt. And doubt threatened the entire structure. As long as projects continued, belief could be maintained. As long as belief existed, decisions could be delayed. The machines no longer served the war. They served the illusion of control. The war fought against reality. By the final year, Germany was no longer fighting the Allies. It was fighting reality itself. Every unfinished machine was an argument against surrender. Every delayed project was proof that hope still existed. But hope built on illusion collapses silently. In the end, these machines were never meant to arrive. They were meant to postpone truth. And truth, delayed long enough, becomes disaster. When the war finally collapsed, it did not end with one dramatic moment. There was no single sound. No final machine. No last miracle. Instead, it ended quietly. Factories went silent. Power shut down. Orders stopped arriving. And scattered across Germany, something strange remained behind. The machines. What the Allies found. As Allied forces moved deeper into German territory, they expected resistance. What they found instead was abandonment. Deep inside forests, enormous machines sat motionless. Inside underground tunnels, production lines stood frozen in time. In hidden facilities, weapons existed only as fragments. Some machines were nearly complete. Others were nothing more than frames and components. Many had never been powered on. They were massive. They were complex. And they had never mattered. These were not battlefield discoveries. They were archaeological ones. Weapons without a war. The Allies were confused at first. Why were so many resources invested in machines that never reached combat? Why were production facilities so elaborate for weapons that were unfinished? Why did so many projects exist only on paper? Slowly, the answer became clear. These machines were never designed for the war as it actually existed. They were designed for the war that existed in one man's imagination. A war where size replaced strategy. And belief replaced logistics. Adolf Hitler had not been fighting the same war as his soldiers. The final illusion. Until the very end, reports continued. Even as Berlin collapsed, paperwork claimed progress. Even as fuel vanished, machines were described as nearly ready. Even as defeat was unavoidable, belief was protected. The machines gave the illusion of control. As long as they existed, surrender could be delayed. As long as they were being built, hope could be claimed. But hope built on imagination does not survive reality. Why these machines failed without failing? Historians later struggled with how to describe these projects. They were not simple failures. They were not technical disasters. In a strange way, they succeeded. They did exactly what they were designed to do. They impressed. They distracted. They delayed. They allowed belief to survive longer than logic. And that may have been their most destructive achievement. The cost that can never be measured. It is impossible to count what these machines truly cost. Not just steel. Not just fuel. Not just labor. They cost time. Time that could have been used to simplify weapons. Time that could have supported soldiers. Time that could have shortened the war. Instead, time was spent feeding illusions. And illusions demand sacrifice. The silence after belief collapsed. When the war ended, no one defended these machines. There were no speeches about them. No celebrations. No explanations. They were simply left behind. Too large to move. Too complex to finish. Too pointless to save. They rusted quietly. And in that silence, history finally spoke honestly. What history understood too late. These machines did not lose the war on their own. But they revealed something dangerous. A system where truth is feared. Will always choose appearance over reality. A system where belief replaces evidence. Will build monuments instead of solutions. And when leadership demands admiration instead of honesty. Engineering becomes theater. The war did not end because the machines stopped coming. The machines stopped coming because the war was already over. They were never meant to fight. They were meant to convince. And when belief finally collapsed, all that remained were silent machines. Waiting for a war that no longer existed. Berlin, 1944. The war no longer sounds like victory. There are no cheering crowds. No proud parades. No confident speeches. Now there are sirens. Explosions. And long moments of silence after the bombs fall. Entire streets vanish overnight. Factories that once powered the German war machine are reduced to twisted metal and smoke. Rail lines are broken. Fuel is almost gone. Germany is bleeding. And everyone knows it. Everyone except the man at the top. Deep underground, far away from the burning city, the war continues inside bunkers and conference rooms. Not on battlefields, but on blueprints. Not with soldiers, but with engineers. Men in white coats. Men with shaking hands. Men who understand physics, steel, and limits. They stand in a room, waiting. At the front is Adolf Hitler. He does not ask how bad the situation is. He does not ask how many factories were destroyed last night. He asks only one question. Where are my new weapons? The room goes quiet. Because in that moment, every engineer understands something terrifying. The truth is no longer safe. By late World War II, being an engineer in Nazi Germany is no longer a respected profession. It is one of the most dangerous jobs in the country. Earlier in the war, engineers were celebrated. They were innovators. Problem solvers. Builders of Germany's military strength. Now, they are something else. They are expected to perform miracles. The war has turned against Germany. The army is retreating. The Air Force is overwhelmed. The Navy is nearly useless. But Hitler refuses to accept defeat. Instead, he places his faith in technology. Not realistic technology. Not tested technology. Miracle weapons. And the engineers are expected to deliver them. Every engineer knows the rules, even if no one says them out loud. If a weapon fails, someone must be blamed. If a deadline is missed, someone must answer. If progress is questioned, someone must be punished. Failure is not treated as a technical problem. It is treated as betrayal. Engineers have seen what happens to people who bring bad news. Generals are removed. Scientists are arrested. Officials disappear without explanation. Some are sent to prison camps. Some are sent to the front lines with a rifle instead of a blueprint. Everyone understands the message. Honesty can kill you. Adolf Hitler believes that technology can fix anything. Lost soldiers? Build better weapons. Lost territory? Build weapons that scare the enemy. Lost the war? Build weapons that change reality itself. He becomes obsessed with the idea of Wunderwaffe, miracle weapons that will reverse Germany's fate. These are not just military projects. They are emotional anchors. As long as new weapons are coming, defeat does not exist in Hitler's mind. And so, engineers are asked to design machines that ignore reality. Weapons that require materials Germany no longer has. Weapons that need factories already destroyed. Weapons that demand time Germany does not have. Engineers understand this immediately. But Hitler does not want explanations. He wants belief. Something changes inside German research facilities around 1943 and 1944. Engineers stop asking whether a weapon can be built. They start asking something else. How long can we delay? Because delay becomes survival. As long as a project appears important, its engineers are protected. They stay in laboratories instead of trenches. They remain useful instead of suspicious. A project does not need to succeed. It only needs to look promising. So engineers learn to speak a new language. Not the language of physics. The language of optimism. They stop giving exact dates. They use words like soon, almost ready, and final testing phase. They add complexity to designs, because complexity looks impressive. They create blueprints that appear powerful but are impossible to manufacture. On paper, these weapons are unstoppable. In reality, they are fantasies. But fantasies keep people alive. Inside Nazi Germany, an unspoken agreement forms. Everyone knows the war is lost. Everyone knows the weapons are unrealistic. Everyone knows the promises are lies. But no one says it aloud. Not the engineers. Not the officers. Not even the generals. Because the system punishes realism and rewards hope. Lying is not rebellion. Lying is obedience in a safer form. If Hitler wants miracles, miracles will be promised. If Hitler wants victory, victory will be drawn on paper. And as long as the paper looks convincing, the people drawing it are allowed to live. By late 1944, Adolf Hitler believes salvation is coming. New rockets. New aircraft. New machines that will terrify the enemy and restore control. On maps and blueprints, Germany looks powerful. On the ground, it is collapsing. And the engineers keep working. Not to win the war, but to survive it. They lie about timelines. They lie about progress. They lie about what is possible. Each lie buys them another day. But lies are dangerous things. They grow. They multiply. And eventually, they demand proof. By late 1944, lying is no longer accidental. It is organized. Calculated. Refined. What began as small exaggerations has now turned into something much larger. Engineers are no longer just hiding the truth. They are actively creating illusions. And Adolf Hitler is buying every single one of them. Inside underground meeting rooms, Long tables are covered with blueprints. Huge machines. Strange weapons. Impossible designs. The rooms smell of cigarette smoke, sweat, and fear. Engineers stand beside their drawings, rehearsing what they will say. Not how the weapon works, but how it sounds. Because Hitler does not judge weapons by feasibility. He judges them by imagination. Hitler wants certainty. He wants confidence. He wants engineers to speak as if victory is inevitable. So engineers learn a dangerous lesson. The more impossible the weapon sounds, the more Hitler likes it. A normal gun does not impress him. A better tank barely holds his attention. But a weapon that promises to change the entire war? That makes his eyes light up. And engineers notice this immediately. Meetings with Hitler follow a pattern. He enters the room late. Everyone stands. No one speaks until he does. He walks slowly between tables, looking at drawings like they are pieces of art. Then he stops, points, and asks the most dangerous question an engineer can hear. Will this win the war? There is only one safe answer. Yes. Engineers begin tailoring their projects to Hitler's psychology. They exaggerate range. They exaggerate speed. They exaggerate destructive power. They speak confidently. They avoid technical details unless asked. And when Hitler asks about problems, they redirect. Minor issues. Already solved. Final phase of development. Words that sound reassuring. Words that cannot be proven false immediately. One lie becomes especially powerful. The lie of timing. Engineers promise weapons will be ready soon. Not tomorrow. Not next week. But always soon enough to matter. 6 months. 1 year. After final testing. These timelines are not random. They are carefully chosen. Far enough away to avoid verification. Close enough to keep Hitler hopeful. As long as a project is almost ready, it remains protected. And so do the people working on it. Some engineers go even further. They design weapons that are deliberately impossible to build. Not because they want to sabotage the regime, but because impossible weapons can never fail publicly. A weapon that never leaves the drawing board cannot be tested. And a weapon that is never tested cannot embarrass anyone. On paper, it is perfect. In reality, it is safe. These projects become known unofficially as paper weapons. They exist in reports, presentations, and diagrams. They look powerful. They look advanced. They look revolutionary. But they depend on materials that do not exist. Or factories that have been destroyed. Or technologies that are decades away. Engineers know this. Hitler does not. As these projects pile up, something strange happens. Hitler becomes more detached from reality. Every defeat on the battlefield is balanced by a promise in the laboratory. Lost a city? A new weapon will retake it. Lost an army? A new machine will replace it. The worse the war gets, the more fantastical the promises become. And Hitler encourages it. He rewards optimism. He punishes doubt. Engineers who express concerns are quietly removed. Not always arrested. Sometimes reassigned. Sometimes sent to the front. Sometimes simply never seen again. The message spreads quickly. Belief keeps you alive. Skepticism gets you killed. So even engineers who know the lies are dangerous continue telling them. Because stopping would be even more dangerous. Inside research facilities, conversations change. Engineers no longer ask each other, "Will this work?" They ask, "How convincing is it? How long can this project last? How many meetings can it survive? How much detail is too much?" Entire careers are now based on presentation, not production. Some engineers begin to believe their own lies. Not fully, but enough to function. They convince themselves that maybe, somehow, the weapon might work. Maybe a miracle will happen. Maybe history will bend. Because believing the lie makes it easier to tell. And easier to live with. By early 1945, Hitler is surrounded by promises. Maps showing future victories. Diagrams showing unstoppable weapons. Reports filled with confident language. Germany may be collapsing, but on paper, it is unbeatable. Hitler believes he is being betrayed by generals. By soldiers. By the world. But never by his engineers. Because the engineers give him exactly what he wants. Hope. But lies have a cost. Every promise creates expectation. Every delay raises suspicion. And as the war closes in on Berlin, Hitler begins asking harder questions. Questions that no blueprint can answer. Questions that demand proof. By early 1945, the lies are no longer comfortable. They are heavy. They sit in every meeting room. They hide behind every blueprint. They follow every engineer like a shadow. Because now, the war is no longer far away. It is at the door. Berlin is surrounded. Bombs fall closer. Trains barely run. Fuel is rationed to almost nothing. Factories that were supposed to build miracle weapons no longer exist. And yet, the reports continue. Progress is steady. Final testing underway. Deployment expected soon. Soon has become a dangerous word. At first, fake timelines were useful. They bought months. They bought protection. They bought survival. But timelines come with a problem. Eventually, time runs out. Hitler begins asking the same question again and again. When will it be ready? And this time, the room feels different. Meetings become more frequent. Less theatrical. More aggressive. Hitler interrupts presentations. He points at drawings. He asks for numbers. How many units? How fast? How soon? Engineers respond carefully. They repeat the same phrases. Unexpected delays. Minor adjustments. Final optimization phase. But the words feel thinner now. Less convincing. Paper weapons, once a shield, begin to turn into traps. Because Hitler wants to see progress. Not just drawings. He wants prototypes. Demonstrations. Proof that something exists beyond ink and paper. And this is where panic spreads. Some engineers scramble to build partial models. Not real weapons. Not functional machines. Just enough metal and wires to look convincing. Shells without engines. Frames without systems. Parts assembled only for display. These mock-ups are rolled into rooms like stage props. Hitler looks at them closely. Touches them. Asks questions. And every question feels like a test that could end a life. Others choose a different strategy. They delay deliberately. They request more resources that do not exist. They demand materials Germany cannot supply. They claim testing requires conditions impossible to create. Each request buys time. Each obstacle pushes the deadline further away. But delay itself becomes suspicious. Inside research facilities, Fear becomes constant. Engineers whisper in hallways. They destroy notes. They rewrite reports late at night. Everyone is trying to stay one step ahead of reality. Because reality is catching up fast. Some engineers crack under pressure. They start contradicting earlier reports. They forget what they promised months ago. One meeting says 6 months. Another says 1 year. Hitler notices. His patience thins. The atmosphere changes. Punishments begin quietly. An engineer is reassigned temporarily. Another is removed from a project. Another simply stops appearing. No announcements. No explanations. Everyone understands. The lies must be perfect now. There is no room for mistakes. Yet the situation outside the bunkers is undeniable. Enemy forces move closer every day. Cities fall. Supply lines collapse. And miracle weapons still do not appear. Hitler begins to feel surrounded not just by enemies, but by deception. He starts accusing generals of betrayal, officers of cowardice. And slowly, dangerously, his attention turns toward the engineers. Why have I not seen results? Who is responsible? Who has been lying to me? These questions hang in the air like a death sentence. Engineers respond by lying harder. Bigger promises. Bolder claims. More dramatic language. If small lies worked before, maybe big lies will work now. They claim weapons are days away. That final issues are solved. That deployment will change everything. They hope the war will end before proof is demanded. Some engineers secretly hope for capture. Being taken by the enemy feels safer than facing Hitler's anger. Others hope for chaos. For bombings. For anything that interrupts meetings and inspections. Time itself becomes the enemy. By April 1945, Berlin is under direct attack. The bunker becomes the center of a collapsing world. Outside, the Reich is dying. Inside, reports still speak of future victories. The contrast is surreal. Almost insane. And then, the most dangerous moment arrives. Hitler demands final answers. No delays. No excuses. No soon. He wants to know which weapons will save Germany. And when. The lies have reached their limit. By April 1945, there is no more pretending. Berlin is a city under siege. Artillery shakes the ground day and night. Buildings collapse street by street. Fire burns without pause. The war that engineers tried to delay has finally arrived. And it has arrived inside the bunker. The meetings stop feeling like briefings. They feel like interrogations. Hitler no longer sits quietly listening to presentations. He interrupts. He accuses. He demands names. Who promised this? Who said it would work? Who delayed production? Engineers stand frozen. Every word feels like a trap. Blueprints no longer impress him. Promises no longer calm him. He wants results. And there are none. The miracle weapons never arrive. No mass deployment. No decisive strike. No turning point. Only silence. Hitler's mood swings become extreme. One moment, he is confident. The next, he is furious. He lashes out at generals. At officers. At anyone within reach. And slowly, the engineers fall into his line of sight. The very people who once gave him hope now represent betrayal. Some engineers attempt honesty. They explain shortages. Destroyed factories. Lack of fuel. Impossible timelines. It is too late. Truth now sounds like excuse. And excuses sound like treason. Others continue lying. They insist weapons are hours away. That final adjustments are being made. That everything will work if given just a little more time. But time is gone. The bunker shakes with every explosion. Reality crashes through the concrete walls. Outside, Germany no longer exists as a functioning state. Communication breaks down. Orders contradict each other. No one knows who is in charge anymore. Inside the bunker, power becomes personal and unstable. Engineers begin to realize something chilling. The lies that once protected them are now dangerous. Every promise creates anger. Every delay fuels suspicion. Every optimistic report feels like mockery. They are trapped by their own words. Some engineers try to disappear. They fake illness. They avoid meetings. They hide in damaged facilities. Others seek reassignment. Anything to escape the bunker. Anything to avoid the final confrontation. But escape is almost impossible. The city is surrounded. The bunker is sealed. Everyone inside knows how this ends. The only question is who will survive it. Hitler retreats further into isolation. He spends hours studying maps that no longer reflect reality. He imagines armies that no longer exist. He waits for weapons that will never come. And when they do not arrive, his anger turns inward. He believes he has been betrayed by everyone. Engineers feel the shift. The protection is gone. They are no longer valuable. They are liabilities. People who promised miracles and delivered nothing. As the final days approach, meetings stop entirely. There is no point. No weapons to discuss. No future to plan. Only the present remains. And it is collapsing. In the final hours, the lies no longer matter. The war is lost. The bunker becomes a tomb. And the engineers face a terrifying truth. Survival now depends not on lies, but on what happens after the war ends. When the war ends, it does not end cleanly. There is no moment where everything stops and resets. There is only collapse. Berlin falls. The bunker is silent. The regime that demanded miracles disappears almost overnight. And suddenly, the engineers who spent years lying to survive find themselves in a new world. A world where lies have different consequences. For many engineers, the first feeling is relief. They are alive. They are not in the bunker anymore. They are not being questioned by Hitler. The immediate danger is gone. But another kind of danger begins to appear. Accountability. The Allies move quickly to secure documents, factories, and people. They are not just interested in weapons. They are interested in knowledge. Blueprints. Research notes. Technical expertise. The same engineers who once feared execution are now valuable assets. Some engineers are arrested. Questioned. Investigated. Their wartime reports are compared with reality. The promises. The timelines. The miracle weapons that never existed. Many claim they were forced. That they had no choice. That lying was survival. And often, they are believed. Others avoid scrutiny entirely. They destroy documents. They hide their involvement. They blend back into civilian life. The chaos of the collapse makes it easy. Records are incomplete. Witnesses are gone. Responsibility is hard to prove. A strange thing happens in the post-war years. Many of the engineers who designed impossible weapons continue their careers. Some are recruited by former enemies. Some are taken to new countries. Some help build entirely new military programs. Their past fades into technical footnotes. The lies they told during the war are rarely discussed. Not because they are unknown, but because they are inconvenient. It is easier to talk about failed weapons than about the fear that created them. Historians later debate these engineers. Were they cowards? Were they victims? Were they quiet resistors? The answer is uncomfortable. They were survivors. They lived in a system where truth was deadly, and lies were safer. The miracle weapons never saved the Reich, but the lies surrounding them saved lives. Not soldiers, not civilians, but the men who designed them. The cost of those lies is harder to measure. Resources wasted, time lost, false hope prolonging suffering. Each promise delayed reality. Each delay extended the war. And yet, the engineers did not control the system. They adapted to it. They learned what it rewarded. They learned what it punished. And they behaved accordingly. In the end, the story is not just about machines. It is about power. About fear. About what happens when truth becomes dangerous. When engineers are punished for honesty, they stop being engineers. They become storytellers. Actors. Survivors. World War II did not end because miracle weapons failed. It ended because reality could no longer be ignored. No blueprint could stop it. No lie could delay it forever. The bunkers collapsed. The papers burned. The lies ended. But the lesson remains. When leaders demand miracles instead of truth, lies become the most powerful weapon of all. END